Okay, guys, so this is my second attempt at a screencastify because the last one I did, the whole Rime of the Ancient Mariner ending, I don't know if it worked. So it cut off when I was trying to explain this assignment. So just a real quick thing, because I'm going to post this before the other one gets figured out. Once we finish talking about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which I have one lecture for you to watch, we're going to finish up by doing a timed write. And the timed write it's covered in the lecture. But anyway, the poem itself is leading us into our next book, which is Frankenstein. For Frankenstein, to better understand it, I know some of you have read it before, but to get the best understanding of it, there's really a lot of essential background you need to know. So the only assignment for this week, aside from the timed write that I put up a little thing that you have to say which day you would prefer to do it. The only other assignment is for you guys to do some notes over some essential background for Frankenstein. So this is the document that I'm going to share on Classroom for you to see. And it basically tells you how I want you to do the notes. Now, this is totally up to you, whatever works for you. You can do them electronically, you can do them by hand, but it is going to make a huge difference to your overall understanding if you actually look into this. And since we have nothing but time, that should be really good for us. So the first thing on here is the essential questions. I do want you to do this part, especially after you watch the ending lecture on Rime of the Ancient Mariner. You'll see that a lot of these questions kind of go hand in hand. So what's the nature of humanity? Well, in the Rime of the Ancient Mariner lecture, I talk about the idea of duality. Man is not just one thing, not just bad or not just good, but can be both. So with each of these questions, just like I want you to at least think about them. Initial thoughts could be like, what do you think? What are the rights of the living? In other words, I'm alive. What kind of rights do I have? Can I do whatever I want? How much freedom do I have? Kind of autonomy, things like that. So just your initial reactions. So for each of these bold headings, I'm afraid to draw with anything now because I don't want this to crash. But for each of the bold headings, I want you guys to have that in your notes and then add some things below it. So for the essential questions, I don't care if you number these and then just write your thoughts, or if you're going to copy and paste this and just write your thoughts next to it, that's totally fine. For literary terms to define, this link right here, the literary device resource, this is like one of those online encyclopedia things where if you put in these terms, it'll give you the definition. So again, if you're doing this electronically, you can copy and paste. But if you also go all the way down to the bottom of the post, it'll have the function of that. So let's see if I can actually open this right now. We'll put in frame story just so you can kind of really quickly see. I don't mean to insult your intelligence. You can obviously fast forward through this if this is a waste of your time. All right, so frame story. I feel like I'm out of breath. I haven't talked this much in weeks. All right, so there's your definition. You can copy and paste the definition of frame story. And then if you go all the way down, aside from all these awesome examples, it gives you the function. I just want you to kind of read into it because it's not just that we want to know, oh, this is a frame story, I identified it. But again, why would we use a frame story? So the Rime of the Ancient Mariner is an example of a frame story. It's an old man talking to a young man about something that's happened to him earlier. Their Eyes Are Watching God was a frame story. Frankenstein is going to be a frame story. So I would like you, for each of the words listed on the essential background, to put those into the literary device resource, copy and paste it. Okay, so for the rest of these, you'll see with some of them, like Mary Shelley, there's a document and there's a video. You don't have to click on everything, but I would like you to find out some essential information. She's a really interesting character. Not like actually, like she's not a character in the book, but like a character as far as a person. I alluded to earlier in the year, I talked about how there's this really fabulous story about her where she was so in love with her husband, Percy Blythe Shelley, which the disease that caused him to die at a young age, it calcified his heart, and she kept his heart in her writing desk her whole life. So these are just some interesting things to kind of find out, because I think it is important to know about the author before you start reading something, because that can show you why. Romanticism, we are going to be reading Frankenstein through the lens of it's a romantic novel. So not little r romantic, but capital R romantic, meaning there's going to be a lot of imagery. There's a lot of the appreciation of nature, valuing, your feelings and your emotions over intellect and logic. So a lot of those romantic beliefs. So you can click on any of the 3 links, but I also just gave you like a brief, maybe not so brief, kind of what romanticism is. So these are things, again, if you're doing notes electronically, copy and paste them. The Gothic novel, in addition to being a romantic novel, this is a Gothic novel. So if you don't have a lot of familiarity with what Gothic literature is, it would be helpful for you to understand that before reading it so that you can say, oh yeah, this is why this is one of the Gothic elements. Those of you that have read a lot of William Faulkner, we did a little bit at the beginning of the year with him, short stories, but A Rose for Emily, kind of that like grotesque, that's part of the Gothic novel, the settings, things like that. The Prometheus myth, there's a video of it. I would definitely say you should watch the video, kind of throwing it back to some ancient Greek culture. This is important to understanding the overall inspiration for Frankenstein. John Locke, it's important for you to understand some of his beliefs because it's referenced in Frankenstein. So about human understanding, I would read through this. Rousseau is another person that some of his views from his essay on education I would like for you to be familiar with. And then, let's see, what I want you to do at the bottom here for 18th and 19th century scientific exploration. During the time it was written, Frankenstein, the beginning is composed of 4 letters. And it's about a man who is on a boat exploring the Arctic Circle, kind of an Arctic passage. And so the idea of science pushing the boundaries of what is right or what is acceptable, during the time Frankenstein was written, going into the Arctic and trying to find an Arctic passage was one of these things where it was like, oh, that's like a big deal. Like you're expanding science beyond what we think man is supposed to be capable of. It might not seem like a big deal today, but things like stem cell research and the whole idea of just because we can doesn't mean that we should. Those are some of the different scientific things that you'll see can tie in here. So the 18th and 19th century scientific exploration topics, I would just like you to kind of look through these and just understand, because this kind of shows how during the time that this novel was taking place, these were some of the ways that science was pushing the boundaries. And then if you go down to the next one, contemporary relevance, these are some ways that currently people are pushing the boundaries of science. So with the contemporary relevance ones, I don't think you need to go through and take notes on what each of these are. I would say maybe choose 2 and look into them. The head transplant one's kind of ridiculous, but if there's other ones where you're like, this is kind of interesting, I'll look at it. Go ahead. We're obviously not going to be able to do a class activity together with this. So just look into like 2 of them that you think are interesting. The poems for study. You do not need to do anything with this right now. We obviously read the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. This is more just for my own information. We're not going to get to look at all of these. We will look at mutability, lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey. Those of you that did the imagery packet, you read that poem already anyway. So we'll get into a couple of these, but not all of them. So the poems for study, you do not have to do. So I'm going to put this on Google Classroom now. I would like you to have notes by Friday. If you do them electronically, there's going to be a place for you to submit the assignment. You can just submit them electronically, share your document with me. These should be your own, needless to say. So draft back is going to be something I look at, editing history. If you do them by hand, just take a picture of it and submit your picture to Classroom so that I can see that you've done some notes. So this is your Frankenstein Essential Background assignment, and I just wanted you guys to have that. More on the Rime of the Ancient Mariner later, and also I'll have a little post about the AP exam. Okay, so happy researching.